the invisible distance between viewer and subject. Photography has a remarkable ability to create intimacy. A photograph can place us face to face with a stranger. We can study their expression, observe their posture, notice the smallest details in their eyes, their hands, or the way they occupy a space. For a moment, it can feel as though we know them, as though we have been invited into a private moment of their life. But there is something important to remember. No matter how intimate a photograph feels, a distance always remains. An invisible distance, and that distance can never be completely crossed. This is one of the great paradoxes of photography. The camera brings us closer to people we have never met, yet it also reminds us how much remains unknown. When we look at a photograph, we often believe we are seeing a person. In reality, we are seeing a moment, a fraction of a second selected from an entire lifetime. The photograph reveals something, but it cannot reveal everything. The person in the image has memories we cannot see, thoughts we cannot hear, experiences that exist beyond the frame. Even the most detailed portrait remains incomplete, and perhaps that is exactly what makes it so fascinating. Human beings naturally seek connection. We want to understand one another. We search for clues in faces, gestures, and expressions. We try to imagine what another person is thinking or feeling. Photography encourages this process. A single image can inspire empathy, curiosity, and emotional recognition. We see a photograph and think, "I understand that feeling," or "I have experienced something similar." In that moment, a connection forms. But connection is not the same as complete understanding. This distinction is easy to forget, particularly when a photograph feels emotionally powerful. A portrait may suggest sadness, but we do not truly know the person's thoughts. An image may suggest confidence, yet we cannot know the doubts that existed outside the frame. The photograph offers evidence, the viewer creates interpretation. Between those two things lies uncertainty. This uncertainty is not a weakness of photography. It is part of its nature. In fact, it may be one of its greatest strengths. The invisible distance between viewer and subject leaves room for imagination. It encourages questions rather than conclusions. It reminds us that every human being is more complex than any image can fully express. Throughout history, artists have struggled with this challenge. How do you represent a person without reducing them? How do you reveal something meaningful while acknowledging that much remains hidden? Photography does not solve this problem, but it makes us aware of it. Every portrait exists somewhere between revelation and mystery. The viewer sees enough to feel connected, yet not enough to possess complete knowledge. In today's world, where images are shared constantly, this idea feels increasingly important. We often form opinions about people based on photographs alone. We assume we know who they are, what they believe, how they live, what kind of person they might be. Yet a photograph is only a fragment, a glimpse, a single page from a much larger story. The rest remains invisible. Perhaps the most respectful way to view a photograph is to recognize both its power and its limitations. To appreciate the connection it creates while remaining aware of the distance that remains. To feel empathy without assuming certainty. To remain curious rather than judgmental. The next time you encounter a portrait that seems deeply personal, pause for a moment. Consider how much you can see. Then consider how much remains unseen. Because every photograph contains two realities. The reality that appears within the frame, and the reality that exists beyond it. The viewer may approach the subject through the image, but there will always be a space between them, an invisible distance, not a barrier to understanding, but a reminder that every person is larger than any photograph can ever capture.